For me, everything revolved around the brain. And it wasn't until life just couldn't get any more dysfunctional that I finally understood that it was time to find a different approach. And that began the journey to the heart. The heart, there are actually more neurons going from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart.
Right.
And the heart controls the subconscious mind. So when we are talking about learning, we cannot learn until we have defeated the program that says you are not able.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I am your host, Stacy Urick, and today's guest is Dr. Marcia Martin. Let me tell you a little bit about Marcia before we get started. Marcia is a spiritual empowerment counselor. She helps people recover from abuse and trauma. This is why she's here. By clearing and healing the heart with the help of her angelic team. Her work first helps people to feel empowered, and then they're able to transform their lives and step into their freedom. They're also taught how to engage with and expand their own clair skills so they can easily interact with their own angelic realm. What I love about Marcia is the duality that she brings to the table, because Marcia is also an MED, PhD. She didn't always start in this space. So I want you guys to hear the story of how she came to this from her own healing transformation. So welcome, Marcia.
Well, thank you, Stacy. I'm so glad to be here. And yes, it has been quite a journey. For me, everything revolved around the brain. So I just spent most of my life feeling disempowered, but in a worship relationship with the brain. And it was just, if I can change my thoughts, then I will be better able to move forward. But I never was really able to change my thoughts successfully. I could do it for a short time when I was paying attention, but the minute that I went off to do something else, all these worries and anxieties and thoughts of failure kept creeping up, and they became sort of the place from which I lived. So I found myself working very hard to please everyone and to try to create a dialogue that said, well, I'm a good person. So because I'm a good person, then I should have good things happen to me. But instead, what I found is it didn't matter how many good things I did, because I was holding on to the understanding that I was a failure, or I wasn't worth anything, or whatever it was that I had to share wasn't as good or as beneficial as someone else. So I was always in that deficit position, and being in the brain just wasn't cutting it. So it was, school, brain. And it wasn't until life just couldn't get any more dysfunctional that I finally understood that it was time to find a different approach. And that began the journey to the heart.
I'm so excited to talk about this with you. So just to give people the backstory, when you say it was all brain, and school, what were you getting your degree in, and what were you studying?
So my bachelor's was in education, and I was a teacher. And then my master's was also in education and psychology. So again, really looking at, and I was particularly interested in the development. How do we develop? How does the brain develop? And if we could help the brain development, then we could help students learn more effectively. And actually, while I was teaching, I thought I was addressing the brain, but I was being guided to address the heart. So while I was teaching, I did come up with a modality that would help people learn, but it wasn't brain-based, it was heart-based. And I just wasn't recognizing it because I was so focused on, well, if I can just change the way the brain is acting or responding or able to learn, then I can change the experience.
Oh my gosh. So I have a question for you. And this is really going to be a great conversation. So I want to use the example that you're giving right now as something for the audience to hear, because I know it's going to click with someone. So when you're talking about trying to utilize how the brain works to help somebody learn, and it's not clicking, but yet when you can get to the heart, now you start to see the click. So I want to use the example of ADHD because I'm in this world all the time. I just came out of a class, a 2-hour class on internal family systems, and we were talking all about complex PTSD and ADHD and all of the parts that show up with that, and the Venn diagram where there's such a blend and there's so much similarity. And I know people who walk with ADHD that have this significant, what I'm going to put in quotes, executive dysfunction, right? They have this deficit with the executive function, but they also walk with a tremendous amount of shame because they feel very, very different, which I feel is a very heart-centered emotion. And what people don't understand is that there's this conduit between the body and the brain, right? It's that mind body connection. And if shame is running in the forward, I should pull my little brain down here. If shame is pulling forward, then our amygdala is going to get triggered. And when our amygdala gets triggered, our prefrontal cortex goes offline, which is where so much of our learning happens, right? The planning, prioritizing, organizing, all this jazz. So to work with somebody to be able to kind of quiet that amygdala so it's not so engaged, so they don't go into that freeze mode, allowing that child to feel seen, heard, understood, significant, and valuable, which could counteract the shame. In theory, and this is where I want to ask you, your amygdala will then calm down a little bit, and now this part of your brain can reactivate. Would you agree with that? Is this what you were starting to see?
100%. I was put in a classroom where the children had already been identified as failing, and these are 8-year-olds. And it was happened at a time when I felt like I was the biggest failure on the planet. So I needed them to succeed, not for them, for me, because I couldn't handle any more failure around me. And so I was given the information of just help them succeed, show them they can do it. And so I thought, well, all I really need to do is present them with material that is very easy for them. And that's going to solve the problem. So I teach this lesson that I think, someone in kindergarten could probably get a hold of this. And big zero, big bomb. The first little guy to come up to me has just a paper that's a mess. And then I realized it's not the cognition, it's the way they're relating to me and to the experience of being in the school, in the classroom, in the place where the failure has happened.
Right.
So, if in this particular incident, I just erased all of his answers and we started doing them together. And so he could have the experience of getting the right answer. And I coached and coached and coached until he could come up with the right answer. And that's the way the pattern that we developed was you can do your paper over again 16,000 times, but you won't take that paper home until you have 100.
Brilliant.
So that you now associate every time a paper goes home, I am brilliant. And what happened for these children is when we began, gosh, that paper, we had holes in the paper from the erasures of getting it right. By the time end of grade test came, they were independently scoring a 100.
I love you. Let me ask you a question. So, can you describe the kind of district that you were in? I just, in my gut, I'll just ask, was this kind of a poverty stricken district, or did these children maybe come from, very adverse experiences from home?
This particular, it was not a low income district, but they had given me all of the students that were having difficulty.
I'm just so
So
curious if there was, and you may not know now, but it's the way my brain works and how I research. Like, I'm wondering if back then there had been a study of, more of an ACEs kind of trauma focused, what was going on at home, if there would have been some sort of commonality.
I guarantee you, every one of those children had some sort of trauma.
Yeah.
Now, for me, trauma can be mom or dad looks at your paper from years kindergarten through second grade and says, "Why are
The
you
hell's
so
wrong with you?
stupid?" Right.
Right.
What's
Right.
wrong with you? Why are you so stupid? So the minute this one little boy looked at his paper and saw a huge 100 on it, his world changed.
Uh-huh.
And so that just meant that because he was the one willing to go first, he was the incentivizer for the rest of the people to want to work hard enough to also earn that 100. So, what I have learned moving forward now that I have been studying the heart is the heart, there are actually more neurons going from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart. And
Right.
the heart controls the subconscious mind. So, when we are talking about learning, we cannot learn until we have defeated the program that says you are not able. And so,
Amen.
what we do first is speak to the subconscious mind through the heart connection and say, we're going to release this false programming and replace it with truthful programming.
Okay.
Words of truth, words of affirmation, words of,
I am enough.
yes, words of gosh, I can't, come on, Angel. I can't find the word that it's just words that are true for the first time ever. Because
Well,
truly, the false narrative is there's something wrong with
that's
you.
right. That's right. And when we get to the root, when we get to the core, right? So you and I do very similar work, just in very, very different ways. When we get to the core of it, this is a personal philosophy of mine, but I believe it's true, is that, when we are born, we're just a ball of energy. We're still just a ball of energy, right? When we're born, but when we're born, we're a ball of energy and love and light that is untainted, meaning we have no paradigms. We have no negative self view. We have no opinions. We have no judgment. We're just massive observers and absorbers of our environment. Right. And then very, very, very quickly, as we're absorbing and observing, and we're seeing how well or not well our needs are being met. So, what are those needs? Water, food, shelter, keep me clean, but I need to know I belong here. I need to know I am enough and worthy and deserving of unconditional connection. Period. End of story. There's nothing I need to do in order to garner that connection, that me just being this ball of love and light is more than enough. But what do we hear? A kid's crying because they need a need to be met. Don't cry, or you're too much, or you're too this, or you're not enough of that. And so we start to either shed authentic pieces of ourselves to meet the
Or
need of
shut
that
them.
person, so they will meet our need, or we start to armor up, right, with these layers and these facades of what it is I think you need me to be in order to feel that connection. So that paradigm, that narrative that you're talking about, that becomes now a separate part from the self. The self is still there, it's just not primary, right? You have these other parts that, this is the way I work. You have these other parts that kind of come forward facing, that are kind of in a protective mode, because you started to believe that bridge to yourself. You're starting to believe you're not enough. So your view of yourself is not enough, and you don't want anybody to see that. So you start to create these protective layers, right? So now you have
Yeah.
kids in these classrooms who don't think they're enough. They've been given some sort of messaging that confirms that. And here you are, this very cognitive approach teacher. You must have been a little rattled yourself from your own philosophy of like, how did I not know this part of teaching?
Well, and I think, honestly, I remember walking into the classroom and thinking, I don't know how to do anything. So it was a long journey, even in that space of learning to get out of the brain. But I never really would, in my teaching years, I never gave myself permission to leave the brain space because my own heart was wounded so badly that I didn't believe that it had anything to offer. So
Right.
it operated by default when those children needed me so badly that I couldn't help but override the brain function because they needed me. So they pulled it from me. They pulled exactly what they needed. But now in my work today, I don't even let people go. Who cares what the brain is doing? Let's get this right. The brain is only a receptor. If you are able to release the pain of the heart, if you let go of all of that trauma and all of the ways that people believed that you needed to do something to become worthy and just recognize who you are perfect as
That's
you
my
are.
point, right? That's that self is that ball of love and light that is nothing but pure perfection. So, how do you do this work? Let's talk about that because I want to give you a lot of time with that.
It is so magnificent just to be able to leave all of this noise behind and go here to the energetic heart space and just relax, just be. Just allow yourself to be enfolded by the unconditional love that's waiting there for you. And especially if you have been the victim of trauma or abuse, you're playing out this role of this is the best I can hope for, or I have done something to deserve this, or I can't expect to be seen as competent because I have made these mistakes or had these bad things happen to me. And so you are denying yourself that ability to operate at your ultimate from your heart power. And you are just living out the narrative that says, well, other people are better than I am because they don't have these handicaps or these
Right. How do
hindrances.
you get someone to be vulnerable enough where they're willing to connect with their heart? Because I work with so many people that often are in a very disassociative space, right? They're so disconnected from themselves, which is that heart center. And connecting to it would feel so painful to them and so foreign, so unfamiliar, right? So, how do you get them to a place where they feel it is safe and comfortable and familiar enough to be able to get into that space and just rest? Because most times there is no just rest for so many people. So many people
Yes.
are in this deep hypervigilant state. They would look at me if I said that to them and they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, rest is not available to me. And I've not felt rest in a long time because I'm in that permanent fight or flight or freeze zone. So, how do you bridge that gap?
So we begin where they are. So I begin by let me hear what's going on for you, what's happening for you. And then I meet them with unconditional love. And I keep telling them, you are amazing. Look how much you've been able to do, even though you have all of these obstacles and you had all of this that was making it difficult for you. You still managed to get so far.
Mm,
Wouldn't it feel great if you were be able to eliminate some of those obstacles? Let's go into the heart where those obstacles are located, and we're going to lovingly release them. And you're not alone. because the energy of unconditional love, that energy that created you, that's going to do the work for you. So all
Mm.
you have to do is give permission. You don't have to do the heavy lifting. You've done that for so long. This is your opportunity to relax. So we are going to let the energy that is the energy of truth in the world do the work for you, and it will deal with the lies and the subterfuge and the confusion and all of these things that have come against you to make you believe that you're not worthy.
Mm. So sometimes when I'm in, what's the word I'm going to look for? An activated state. Okay. Where I have a sensation that a lot of people would call anxiety rolling through my system. And I think I've learned this a little bit from you, even just recently when you and I were talking about this idea of surrendering and letting go of that sensation and literally giving it up to quote unquote my guides, right? And saying, I have no need for this because we're so desired to control every outcome. We actually don't realize we're holding on to something we don't need. So is that a part of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. But it is so important that you give yourself the opportunity to look at what's happening. So you're reacting, you're reacting, you're reacting. As soon as you can take a breath, take that breath and say, let me take a look at what's happening here. No
Mhm.
judgment. You don't have to correct anything. You're not in school. Just take a look. What's happening? Oh, I'm feeling really anxious about the outcome of this situation. Okay. How does that make me feel? Well, I feel out of control. It makes me feel like I don't have answers. And what would I like instead of this feeling of panic or anxiety? Oh, it would really feel good to feel calm. So, what can I do? Well, I can choose voluntarily, always voluntarily, never
Mhm.
force. I can choose to give away this energy of anxiety, this energy of I'm not enough, this belief that someone would do it better than me. I can give all that away. But then I have to be very conscious to receive something in its place. So I'm going to give away everything that's negative, and I must make sure that I replace it with an affirmational statement and energetic resonance of I am more than enough, or
Mm.
oh, I feel so much better. Let me just breathe in this unconditional love. We can't leave a void. So we can't just say, I'm giving away all this negativity and then hope that we are going to be able to create something that is calming. Got to
Mm.
deliberately give it away. And then I'm giving it away over here. Now change your point of focus. Now I'm going to attach to something calming, something that feels loving and supportive and uplifting to me. I must fill whatever space I create, because we have to recognize that whatever is most dominant in our vibrational field is
Yeah.
going to come back and take over. Not because it's mean or you're stupid or you're incapable, but because it is easier to go to that which is loudest.
That's right.
And so we must practice going to the softer and constantly refilling with the softer, the more delightful, while we move away from the louder, more abrasive.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because as you're talking, the mind does go to what's familiar, right? And so I could see someone in that moment going, but who am I without?
Well, absolutely.
Right?
Oh,
This
yes.
narrative, this sensation, this feeling. And that can be a very, very scary thing for someone.
And that's where you have to say, okay, just for this moment, and give yourself a time, 1 minute, if that's all you can do. For this moment, I'm going to explore what it would be like not to have this anxiety. So I'm choosing to give it up. And if
Yeah.
you need to set an alarm, I'm going to give it up and I'm going to practice being in a space of unconditional love where I just accept everything about myself for one whole minute. And I am going to see how I feel. Do I feel less? Do I feel more? Do I feel nothing? Don't, no judgment, just examine. And even if you feel nothing, well, maybe I'll try it for another minute. But be honest. It's very unlikely that you will be able to feel less because you're giving up the less and saying, I welcome in the more. So be careful if you say, I feel less, really examine that to see whether it's a false belief system or whether it's your truth. Because anxiety, depression, negativity, these are all lower emotions. And love, joy, and peace are on the upper end of the vibrational scale. So there's no way that you could give away something low, welcome in something high, and actually end up with less.
Amazing. I know you're a empowerment counselor, a metaphysical minister, a best-selling author, a public speaker, and a clairaudient angel communicator. If these realms speak to someone that's listening, how can they learn more about this work that you do and connect with you to learn more directly from you?
I am always welcoming you to my website. And we are doing something really special now because I have found that so often those in the trauma and abuse space do not leave that space with their pockets overflowing with money.
Right.
So we have now created the Heart Healing Foundation, and we are offering pay what you can counseling. And that means even if it's zero,
Wow.
because we believe you are more than the dollars in your bank account. And so there are many ways that you can support the foundation. And hey, when you are back in your place of empowerment, please give to the foundation and we will continue giving to those who are in need. So you can join us on either website. It's mmhearthealer.com or the hearthealingfoundation.org. Either way, you will be able to connect with us, discover more about what we're doing. And I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. I am constantly giving little 1 minute tips on what you can do, how to release and replace the energy you don't want with the energy that you do. And also just little snippets of angel advice about, hey, if this is happening, it could be this. So do this instead.
Amazing. So I'll put all of the links in the show notes. We'll have Heart Healer and we'll also have the Heart Healing Foundation. We'll make sure that we get that in there. Dr. Marcia Martin, this has been amazing. I love bringing so many different healing modalities to this channel because the goal is at the end of the day that people feel peace. The goal is that people can
Yes.
step out of the shadow of shame, out of a shadow of disconnect, and feel connected to themselves, to others, and the world around them in a positive way so they can lead a more peaceful life. And I think you've definitely helped us learn a little bit more here today on how to do that. If you are listening to today's podcast and this jives with you, you definitely want to reach out to Dr. Martin, or you can also subscribe to this podcast and listen to all of the different amazing perspectives that we provide here. We have storytelling, we have other practitioners, psychotherapists, psychologists that come in and share different ways to heal. So thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate having you here.
Thanks so much, Stacy. I just want to add that there is no right method for everyone. So go with your heart because when you heal your heart, you will transform your life.
I love it. Thank you. It's a perfect way to end it. Thanks everyone for listening today.